I'm Frank Vaughn. It's November 29th, 2025, and we wind our way down the second last month of the season. And we move into December, one of my favorite months, because it is Christ time. It is Christmas, and I am looking forward to it. We have to start today's video where we left off yesterday, discussing Danielle Smith and this phantom agreement that she signed. Now, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but we all know how things go as I film. I made a tweet at the 2024 United Conservative Party Annual General Meeting. Members unanimously passed a resolution demanding Alberta abandon all net zero targets, not some, all. 1 year later, Danielle Smith signed the MOU committing Alberta to net zero again. The directive and the will of the members was clear, and she ignored both. The appetite in Alberta for the carbon con is at an end. Why is Danielle Smith doubling down yet again, because this is not the first time, on carbon nonsense? Within the MOU is a $15 billion carbon capture scheme, which the taxpayer will be on the hook for. They will have to build it. It's absolute nonsense. It's destined to be abandoned, but she agreed to it. Tammy says, but she got concessions too. Negotiations are like that. Attempting to lecture me. Can you imagine an independent Alberta won't get a pipeline deal unless it runs through the United States, and Alberta would have zero leverage in negotiations with them. They've already got a pipeline going south. It's the only reason anything's happening right now. And I said, LOL, because it's funny. Alberta has zero leverage with Canada, clearly, or she wouldn't have signed that agreement. How do people sustain this pretzel logic? She won zero concessions of any meaningful value due to the concessions she gave up. She agreed to the carbon nonsense. She agreed to the net zero nonsense. So even if this pipeline got built, it won't. Everybody has to agree to it. Nobody will. CARNEY wins. Net zero wins. The green so-called neo-capitalists win, even though they're more like green socialists. The only victory here is for those who want to stop Alberta's prosperity. And she was glad-handing. She was smiling. She affectionately touched his forearm in the meeting. And compare and contrast that to what you've all probably seen by now. I don't need to waste your time showing you again. The way that she got booed at the AGM when she talked about this deal, and hoping that the people that were assembled at that meeting had their faith restored that Canada works. She got booed by 70% of that crowd, and she could barely chuckle. And the fact that she laughed at them is just further insult to injury. Spencer Beach says, so you'd give up a partnership to get a pipeline to stick to this resolution. Tell me again why you should not be in politics or any leadership position. I shouldn't be in politics and I shouldn't be in a leadership position because I would actually lead. I would actually make arguments for my ideas. I would fight for them. I don't belong in politics for that very reason. And I said to him, you aren't getting a pipeline. Why are you pretending? There's no pipeline in the deal. It's a tax deal. If the pipeline were to actually be built, the oil that was inside it, the oil that would be transported by it, would be $30 or $40 above market value. Nobody would buy it. There will not be a pipeline. BC is here says, it's a memorandum and nothing more. Nothing is binding. This is a retort to my post saying that I should just take it easy. And I responded, I keep seeing this take and it raises two issues. Number one, if it's non-binding, then there is no pipeline. So why is Smith and her supporters victory lapping about a pipeline deal? As well as a lot of the influencer class that plays by the rules so that they can get future interviews with mainstream conservative politicians. Two, if it's non-binding, why sign it in the first place? Agreeing, at least in principle, to a net zero future that she was mandated by her members to oppose. You can't have it both ways, and I see a lot of people attempting to have it both ways. Bold Ideas says, why does Brookfield keep coming to mind in our Alberta Sovereign Wealth Fund? May have zero to do with any of this, but I keep seeing it in my mind's eye. Intuition is a wonderful tool if it is honed and it is refined. The fact is, CARNEY is here for all of our pensions. CPP, maybe Alberta's Sovereign Wealth Fund, public pensions, Brookfield, the pensions, the interrelationship between the two. This is what it's really all about, folks. I was going through some old documents today, and we'll get to that next. But it inspired a tweet because I found my collection of old money I forgot I even had. We used to have an oil refinery right on the $10 bill. Did you know that? If you're younger than 45, you can be forgiven. You may have never seen one of these or possessed one of these. Now it takes 10 years of hearings to decide to never build a pipeline because, let's face it, there's never going to be a pipeline. And if we did, we'd load it with so much carbon baggage, the oil will cost $30 a barrel above market value. Smith and CARNEY, the net zero duo. This bill came into circulation in 1971. Do you know who was prime minister in 1971? Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And under his reign, no one was afraid to put a refinery on a $10 bill. This would never happen now. That's how far down Canada's come from wanting prosperity, from wanting productivity, wanting to make things, wanting to be useful to the world. Now all we talk about is carbon nonsense and oppose anything that would actually strengthen the nation as a whole. And I think it's too late. I really think it's too late, which is why I had hoped Alberta and Saskatchewan would get their gear together and follow the Quebec lead, because Quebec is writing their own constitution. They changed their provincial legislature to a national assembly a long time ago. They carved their own destiny. We could do the same thing. We could engage with our partners in the United States, and we could bypass Ottawa and BC and all the nonsense altogether. But we don't do that. There's a distinct lack of vision, and it's always been that way. Is it a rite of passage? Is it a requirement of being involved in provincial politics in Saskatchewan and Alberta that you have to be committed to your abuser? Every single premier stretching back as far as you can go was a dedicated federalist, even though the federal government is responsible for pretty much all the hardship we have to deal with out here. And speaking of old documents, I have to address this briefly, basically because of one of the responses I got. There are those who would deny history. This is reading the Post. But here's a receipt. Back before the PPC was a dictatorship and had hope of being something better, I was there. This dates to when I submitted 10 or 12, I don't really recall how many signatures I got to submit, of the original 250 signatures that registered the party, not memberships. This was the registration. You can actually go on a Government of Canada website and you can see my name as a registrant of the party. This document is dated, that would be August 20th, 2018, way before, and there's the receipt so that we know what happened. You see, I don't lie. People often accuse me of lying. I don't intentionally lie. Sometimes maybe I get things wrong, but I'm really just trying to tell the truth as much as I possibly can wherever I can. But Gary says to me, you were doing so well with your Max Bernier derangement syndrome. I'm not really sure how this is deranged. I'm sharing a bit of history, but we'll get to that. When you have these max fits, not sure I'm having a fit, I have to just walk away. Good, go for a walk. Maybe unfollow me while you're at it, because it reminds me of Andrew Lawton. That was a big betrayal, but I got over it. Clearly not. You just brought it up. Are you having a fit? Maybe rub some dirt in it. Here's the thing. I just want people to understand. There's a lot of you who have been here for a long time. But then there's a lot of you who just got here in the last year and you don't know the history. People like Gary don't see my inbox. Don't understand that periodically, not all the time, the PPC is really in decline, but I still get emails and messages from people asking me what I think. They have no idea that I ran in 2019. They have no idea of the circumstances of my leaving in 2020. They have no idea how much thought and effort went into this thing before it just became Maxime's private piggy bank, which is what it is. PPC, the purple bank account. Should be called the PPB, the PPB, the purple piggy bank. At any rate, I just want people to know the history, because there are those who deny it, call me a liar whenever I talk about it. The People's Party of Canada is following me. Maxime Bernier has me blocked. It's really interesting. I just got to show you one piece of history, because again, I was going through documents today. That's Maxime's handwriting right there. I wrote him a multi-page document to give him talking points about all of those various subjects. And he made these notes based on the document that I made him. And this was ahead of an event we had in Hamilton where Dave Rubin came down from the States. We had to actually, it was pretty epic. We had to, there was all these Antifa protesters. There was probably, I don't know, 100, 150 of them there. and we had to bust through them to get in the venue. There's famous footage out there of a little old lady with a walker trying to get in the venue, and she's being blocked by these teenage punks. And I recall, I roll up in the van with Max and Salim Mansour, and I can't remember, I think Dave Rubin was in the van with us. There was a bunch of us in this rental van, and everybody jumped out and they went right for the door. And Salim wasn't moving as fast as everybody else, and I stayed back with him, put my arm around him, and I shielded him. I put myself between him and the crowd, and I confronted the crowd. And I'll never forget it because they're screaming that we're white supremacists and that we're Nazis, and they're just giving it to us. And I screamed back at them. I said, does this guy look like a white supremacist? And you should have seen their faces. I'll never forget it. They looked at him, they saw the brown pigment in his skin, and they went pale. And for a split second, reality sunk in. But then, of course, the cloak of darkness came back over their face, and all there was this screaming vitriol and hate. And anyway, eventually we made our way into the venue. But those are notes from that night. This is all just to say, I got a lot more receipts than that, because it's good to have a record of things just in case. But this stuff happened. This is part of history. I'm part of that history. It's part of who I am. And all the new people, tens of thousands of you who have came through the doors in the last year, not even a year, it hasn't even been a year yet. I have to educate you. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. You need to know who I am and where I come from. I'm not ashamed of any of it. I had a whole series of web pages I was going to show you, but I think I'm just going to riff for the next little bit. Trump today, I believe it was today, it might have been yesterday, but it doesn't matter. On Truth Social, he said that all of the Biden-era auto pen orders are null and void effective immediately. Now, there's probably going to be legal challenges and a bunch of nonsense that goes along with that. We'll find out. But the fact of the matter is somebody was running the Biden administration, and it wasn't Joe Biden. The man was senile. Sleepy Joe was a very apt name. You might think it's discourteous. You might think it, offends sensibilities, but let's be real. We're talking about Biden, the man who raised Hunter, the man who was proud of Hunter, that sick, sadistic individual with his crack problem and his whores. This was in the White House. Biden, nobody like Joe Biden brought sodomy and hedonism into the White House, directly into the halls of power. It was disgusting. At any rate, a lot of those Biden auto pen orders involve the pardons that went out to Anthony Fauci and various other high-ranking officials. And we'll be talking about that more, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. But this actually opens the door to prosecution of some of the worst actors in American history. Now, moving on from that, that's an interesting subject, but it's going to develop. I want to talk about Ukraine, and I want to talk about the fact that the number 2 man, Yarnik, I'm going from memory. The number 2 man, either way, resigned today. Said he's heading for the front. I bet you he actually is, because there's nothing but a jail cell waiting for him. This was the man who organized the corruption ring. One of the things I talked about in a tweet this morning was the fact that if you are a member of the armed forces of Ukraine, freezing your balls off, waiting to get killed by drone strikes by the Russians or any other type of incendiary. The war is horrible. The footage I've seen, it's hard to process, but you have to look at it. If you're not looking at what's actually happening on the ground, your heart doesn't have a chance to let in the kind of carnage that you're supporting every time you sport a Ukrainian flag. These men, these boys, are getting killed by drones. It is absolutely heartbreaking seeing them blown up one by one by one by one. I make myself watch it so that I know what it is that I'm upset about this entire thing. And can you imagine being that AFU fighter, sitting in your trench, watching your comrades die, waiting for your turn, barely 3 weeks of training before you're thrown on the front line to be crushed by the Russian military machine, and what you're supporting is this corrupt regime, nice and warm and cozy, back in Kiev, that is taking a great big cut of the aid that Canada is sending them, money from the world. They're taking a cut. They're shitting, pardon my French, in golden toilets. They're lining their bank accounts. They're filling offshore bank accounts. They got money in Switzerland. They got money all over the place. They're as corrupt as it gets. And let me tell you, the mainstream media might not be talking about this very much. But if it wasn't for the Trump administration, and I've had problems with them, I've been very critical at times of the Trump administration. I probably will be in the future. But one of the things I focus on here is trying to tell things how they are without necessarily taking sides. And I'm always being ascribed as being on one side or the other. I'm talking about this stuff with Danielle Smith, and I've been under constant accusations that I'm with the NDP. Those of you who know me know that couldn't be further from the truth. If it wasn't for the Trump administration, if it wasn't for them bypassing Europe, calling Europe's bluff, because Europe is saber-rattling with troops they don't have, with militaries they don't have, with funds they don't have. They're making all of these threats. They're entirely dependent on the United States to make good on those threats. Trump has called their bluff. He's put them in their place. People don't realize it. The World Economic Forum, the International Bank of Settlements, indeed, maybe even the City of London itself, is on the ropes right now as the United States, which has all kinds of its own problems, rising national debt, crime out of control. They got this illegal immigration problem. They're beset by problems on all sides. Their country's been flooded with drugs by China, by Mexico, by Canada. We've basically, under the Biden administration and previous administrations, because the first Trump administration is very different from the second one. The first Trump administration was bogged down from day one. I believe the president was very distracted the entire time. It's amazing he got anything done. But all the while, what's been building on the northern border is a direct and primary security threat to the integrity of the United States. They got a lot of problems. And there is this attempt to stay out of the wars of the old world so that they can reorganize and survive and prosper through the rest of this century in this hemisphere. Fortress North America and a settling of accounts from their point of view. Again, I'm talking about the realities of a republic that has an empire. And that's where I think Venezuela comes into the picture. Venezuela with its ties to China, Venezuela with its ties to Russia. Maybe behind the scenes there is a quid pro quo understanding because the Americans are negotiating directly with the Russians about getting rid of the Zelensky regime, exposing the corruption. The presidential offices were raided and searched by anti-corruption forces. Zelensky's days are numbered, folks. At least I believe they're numbered. I could be wrong. The martial law order expires in February, so we'll see if he's able to extend it. He's losing his political base. There's resignations. There's people fleeing the country. Of course, your mainstream media is not telling you about it. We wouldn't know any of it. None of it would be happening if it wasn't for the Trump administration. So, credit where credit is due. This direct negotiation with Russia might eventually lead to a settlement in Ukraine that lasts for some time. And we'll see how it all plays out. But on the flip side of it is this Venezuela situation. There is a tremendous amount of pressure on Maduro. And the interesting thing is that there are neocons in the administration who want to do this. They want regime change. They want to bomb the hell out of Venezuela. And as per the usual, and this has been a theme throughout the first Trump administration and in this Trump administration, you can criticize them for how they handled the Israeli war all you want. They didn't get drawn into a regime change war in Iran. Yes, they bombed Fordo. Yes, they spent $30 billion defending Israel. I covered that. Why a foreign nation has a dedicated carrier group? I don't know. But the fact is, a wider war was averted, at least for now. And Trump has openly floated this idea that there will be another settlement and some kind of agreement with the existing Iranian regime, trying to extricate American power and resources from the old world empire and redirect them towards stabilizing North and South America for a neo-Monroe doctrine. Doesn't matter if I support it or not. I have my own opinions, but what I try to do is talk about the realities of geopolitics. Venezuela is important. I don't think Trump wants to invade. I think he's willing to. I think he's willing to bomb them. I think he's willing to bomb Mexico. I think he's deadly serious about ending the drug problem in the United States. And I think he has to settle the drug problem with the Chinese through negotiation. War is not an option, but that's a whole other thing. The Japanese are now saber-rattling against the Chinese, talking about how if China invades Taiwan, they might have to get involved. They've hatched plans to evacuate their islands. I don't know if people know this, but they control a chain of islands almost right up to Taiwan. And they're talking about evacuating 20,000 people a day in the event that China invades and possibly getting militarily involved themselves. I don't think Trump wants that. Quite honestly, I don't think Xi wants that. And Trump has phoned the Japanese and said they need to tone down their rhetoric because right now is a very delicate time. There are a lot of very real geopolitical risks for exploding wider warfare that I think it would benefit all of us to avoid. But to boil it all down, there's only going to be two rival orders in this new multipolar world that is emerging. Trump actually nailed it when he called China and the United States the G2. Not G20, not G7, the G2. There's two poles around which nations are gathering. One is BRICS, one is MBridge, which I still haven't managed to cover. They've got this. I got a video sitting on the desktop, which I'll have to try and get to, covering a gold storage facility that was built in Singapore called the Reserve, and I think the name has a lot of special value, but we'll get to that. These societies, not talking about Singapore, but talking about China and Saudi Arabia and various other entities that are involved in the setting up of BRICS, are far more authoritarian. They don't have that Western cultural tradition. And if we're going to set up anything to counterbalance that, it has to be with the Republic, with Washington, with the United States at the center, with North America as the new center of the old empire. And Europe becomes the satellite because they failed. Their version of globalism has failed. Europe, the EU project, has become a totalitarian hellhole in itself. And really, nobody in the world, not the Trump administration, not Xi in China, not the Indians, not the Pakistanis, not the Saudis, nobody's listening to Europe, not Russia. Nobody's listening to Europe anymore. Their days are over. Their day in the sun, their day of dictating global politics has passed. And we'll probably cover that in more detail later. But I really want people to think about, as things transpire, and hopefully we can get through this really rocky time and into this new ordering of things, how powerful, how truly powerful and magnificent Fortress North America as an idea actually is. And to finish up on that point and bring it all back to the beginning, the Smith-Carney MOU, this glad handing with Ottawa, this dedication to Canada, this dedication to the system of Canada, not the land, not the people. There's a lot of good in that still. There's nothing good in the system. There's nothing good in the charter. There's something so backwards about Canada, and I wish I could get more Canadians to perceive how backwards our so-called democracy actually is. It's a constitutional monarchy, folks. It's not a democracy. Anybody who calls it a democracy is gaslighting you. It's a constitutional monarchy. The head of state is the governor general. The government itself is appointed. The Senate is appointed. You can't elect it and do anything with it. You can't touch your judges. You can't do anything, and your charter rights are ephemeral. The government can suspend them on a whim, and you don't even have property rights. And even those property rights that are had, which are held by the natives, are being challenged. I'm getting distracted. We are screwing around with the old order. We are organizing ourselves as though the old world still exists. The old order, something that dates back to the Audis in the 1990s, is still ultimate. It is not. There's something new shaping up. And guess what? We're right beside what could be the center of republicanism, of democratic tradition, the United States. Fortress North America with two beautiful protective oceans with all the resources in the world could stand astride the world and still trade with it and avoid the authoritarian order that is being set up in the other pole, which is China and Beijing and India. Now, you can say India is a democracy, but there's a lot of authoritarianism that's still built into their culture. And just look around. Watch travel bloggers who dare go to India. Look at how their society is organized. Look at their streets. Look at the state of things. There's no inspiration there. That's not where I want to derive my future from. I want to derive my future right here in North America. And that's what we should all be focusing on. And our politicians, as per the usual, are 7 to 10 years behind where they should be. Which is why the betrayal by Danielle Smith really irks me. There's so many different reasons why this betrayal irks me to no end. And it gives me a degree of joy to not only watch her and her ideas getting booed at the AGM, But to watch the UCP forced to cut off the microphone of Mr. Rath, who I think I'm going to need to talk to. At any rate, I'm Frank Vaughn. Thank you, all of you, for the support, for the likes, the shares, because really, we're not monetized, so we're not getting any favors. You guys are building this thing out. You give it whatever value it has. Whatever growth it has is because you folks are out there promoting it. And for those who click the donate link, thank you as well. And I'll see you in the next one.